Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for my top three Facebook advertising hacks for 2020. My name is Larry Kim, and before jumping into all the tips and tricks about Facebook advertising, I wanted to introduce myself briefly. I'm originally from Winnipeg, Canada. It's a city that is famous for being colder than Mars for half the year. I'm slightly obsessed with unicorns, and there's actually about 100 unicorns in this presentation today. Uh, and I'm famous for having created a company called WordStream, which I started about a decade ago out of a bakery called Panera Bread because of free drink refills and no rent. And today it employs hundreds of people managing over $1 billion of ad spend for tens of thousands of companies worldwide. It was my first startup. It was such an exciting journey, taking that from literally nothing to tens of millions of dollars of revenue, annually. And I was able to sell the company to Gannett 2 years ago for $150 million, which was awesome. Last thing I'll say is just I have two kids, Oliver and Julian. There are quite a handful, and I'm happily married with my wife, Kaylee, and we live in Harvard Square in Cambridge. Um, I'm also a founder of a new company called MobileMonkey, which does integrated web chat, SMS marketing, Facebook Messenger, as well as Instagram messaging, all from a single interface. So, enough about me. Back to our story. We're talking about my top three Facebook ad hacks for 2021. And just so we're all on the same page, I'm not talking about like stupid, dumb advice like do really good reporting or something like that, which, I'm sure that's true. But when I talk about hacks, I'm talking about, weird loopholes that aren't illegal that you can kind of clone and replicate in your own account in 20 minutes and see meaningful account improvements, that kind of stuff. And so I'm just giving it away today. My top three ideas for you to try and copy this year, starting with my number three ad hack, which is called the inverted unicorn ad targeting method. What's the inverted unicorn ad targeting method? Well, sometimes it's easier to just take a look. This is an example of an ad which is super hyper targeted. It's creepy. It says, a company that's selling shirts here. They have this image of a T-shirt that says, "Life took me to England, but I'll always be an Arizona girl." What the heck? Look at the comments in this article, in this ad. It's like they're saying, "How many Arizonans live in England?" She's like totally shocked, and they probably think that you're listening to their phone, that Facebook is tapping the phone. And so this example actually came from the CNN news bureau chief from England, who, believe it or not, was originally from Arizona and moved to England. But there was a 12-year period where she was living in Washington, D.C., and she has no clue how the heck Facebook is targeting her using such a targeted ad. And so I'm going to show you how this is done. They're not doing anything illegal. It's actually quite clever. A lot of you know that you can target people who live in England and who are women. And some of you might know that you can kind of overlay certain behaviors like recent move. And by overlaying the two, you end up with kind of an interesting combination. But what's so clever about this ad here is that they somehow know that it's not just that you moved to England recently. They know that you originally came from Arizona. How do they do that? Well, they overlap one additional interest, which is local interests. So people who like high schools or restaurants or sports teams or universities or colleges located in Arizona. Um, does that mean that you're from Arizona? It doesn't. It's not a guarantee, but there's like a 99% chance that you have some kind of local roots there. If you like, otherwise, why are you engaging with all these like local pubs and stuff like this? And so that's the beauty of the inverted unicorn and Facebook ad targeting method. You kind of come up with this implausible combination of attributes and then reflect that back to the recipient, with that very clever ad copy that reveals that we know that you moved to England recently, but were originally from Arizona. So isn't that amazing? So when it comes to Facebook ad targeting, you can target related interests, which is probably what you're doing. And you can also target unrelated interests, which is what the inverted unicorn ad targeting method does. So to give you an example of what I mean by this, an example of related interest targeting, well, this is what everyone does. So this would be very familiar. Say you're like me, you're selling kind of Facebook messaging and web chat integrated software. So you're probably targeting, I don't know, people who like, I don't know, email marketing, but also have job titles. You see how I've combined those two interests, and those are totally overlapping and related interests because there's a very high likelihood that if you like email marketing, that you have some kind of a marketing role. And so, in fact, this is such a common ad targeting method that anyone who clicks on this button here, where it says suggestions in the Facebook Business Manager, like the ad manager, the suggestions that pop out of here are all related interests. So that's been sort of the conventional strategy to kind of cast a very narrow net by layering in related interests. Well, what I'm suggesting here with the inverted unicorn is that you might also want to try unrelated, completely unrelated interests and reflecting that in the ad copy. Here's an example of a marketing software company who, wanted to target people who liked email marketing, but also wanted to target people who liked Daenerys Targaryen or Tyrion Lannister or Game of Thrones or Jon Snow. Like these are all characters from Game of Thrones, and not what are these related? Like, is what's the relationship between email marketing and Game of Thrones? There's absolutely nothing. There's no relation whatsoever. These are two completely independent interests. But what that does is it allows a clever marketer to create ad copy that speaks to not just one of their interests, the marketing interests. It also allows them to blend in this other interest of like, oh, I'm really into that series, and so the effect of this is that people are more interested by the ad copy that you're presenting them, and you end up getting remarkably lower ad costs due to higher engagement rates. So I'm talking like $1 CPM instead of $100 CPMs. You got to try this out, guys. Here's an example of one thing that I did with the inverted unicorn ad targeting method. This was a blog post that I wrote about how to use Facebook ads to promote false news, fake news on Facebook ads, and so the title of it was, this was a couple of years ago, Facebook ads, fake news, and the shockingly low cost of influencing an election. I only had $50 to spend to promote this article. I don't like to waste money, but it was like 1,300 likes, 120,000 reach. You can just see this here. 235 shares, 68 comments. For $50. So like the question is how does this possible? Like, how can you do it? And the answer is, of course, the inverted unicorn. In this picture, okay, most of you won't recognize this guy because he was a minor character in a very obscure show. This is, Senator Vreenak of the Romulan Star Empire, which was like, he wasn't even a regular character. He only appeared on one show and he was assassinated. Okay, and this is from an obscure show in the 90s called Deep Space Nine, which is a Star Trek spinoff. And this particular episode was about fake news in the 24th century. All right, and so what I was doing was I thought that this article would appeal to liberals, but there were like 55 million liberals to target in the United States, and I only had $50. So I wanted to cut it down, and so like I found this really obscure fan page of Deep Space Nine, and I kind of said like, well, listen, you got to be two things. You got to be a liberal, and you have to like Deep Space Nine, and I kind of tied together those two interests through that image, which kind of conjures up this idea of fake news, which was sort of the topic of that obscure episode of this like really crappy show from the 90s. And so I know that's why it worked. You know how I know? Look at the comments. So these were the comments that people left on the ad. Like, who comments on an ad? Seriously. But this thing, it's like $50 spent, and it had like 200 comments. Okay. And everyone's is laughing. They're saying like, oh, I get it. It's not, it's the Romulans. One guy named Mike Alton says, hey, I love that scene from DS9. Great tie. And it's got 9 thumbs up. Okay. So like everyone's agreeing with him. And then this other guy named Andrew, he says he's in total disbelief. He says, how many people really even know what this means? and he's just so shocked that such an obscure ad is doing so well. And that's the beauty of the inverted unicorn. It's that if you weren't aware of these unusual character references or cultural references, you would have never seen the ad in the first place. And so, in summary, the inverted unicorn ad targeting method, I think it's very interesting and worthy of study, or trying out some experiments where you can come up with some seemingly ridiculous ad targeting by combining totally unrelated attributes. This has the benefit of making really, really boring ads somewhat interesting by appealing to multiple interests at the same time. It also allows you to cut down enormous audiences into these really small ways, into these smaller segmentations in an unusual way. That is not so unoriginal. So there's a lot of crazy kooky ad strategies you should be looking to employ here. My number two crazy idea for 2021 is a remarketing strategy, and that is to stop spending money on Facebook ads uh, altogether, except for remarketing. So if you're spending any money on this kind of like non-remarketing campaigns in Facebook, it's probably not a very good value, especially if you're constrained by budget. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about here. There's a huge difference between remarketing ads and non-remarketing ads. How do I know? It's because I've run thousands of experiments running the identical ads, the same bids, the same budgets, like identical in every way, except in one of the ads I'd be targeting remarketing audiences, and in the other I would exclude the remarketing audience and only target new audiences that had similar interests but had not visited my website before. Do you know what the difference was between remarketing and non-remarketing? It was enormous. People who had brand affinity, so those people who had visited my site previously, they were dramatically more likely to click on my new ads. So just the fact that they visited my website recently, that increased the click-through rate of the new ads by 2 to 3 times. Similarly, those clicks were more valuable because those people weren't just looking to get acquainted with my products and services. They'd already been familiar with it, and so they were 2 to 3 times more likely to convert. Keep in mind that the the Facebook algorithm awards high engagement ads with more impression share and lower cost per click, and so it's just this virtuous cycle. All right. And if you looked at your conversions in Google Analytics coming from Facebook ads, what you typically find is around 70% of your conversions come from people who've previously visited your site, representing somewhere around 10% of your ad spend. The flip side of that is that 90% of your ad spend generates almost nothing, like 30% of your conversions. And in 2021, I'm advocating to just cut this out completely. Like, don't you need to gain efficiency somehow, and so this is kind of like the least efficient kind of it's not just a sliver. It's like most of your account is producing nothing, and should be cut, especially if your budgets are tight. And so this is the kind of the summary. It's like marketing's amazing. It triples the click-through rates. It cuts the cost per click in half because of the higher click-through rates. The conversion rates are higher by 3 times. But the problem is it cuts impression volume by a lot. It's just the impression volume. It's not the conversion volume. It's just not generating all these useless impressions. And so I think I can kind of describe this problem here. It would be almost like playing a professional sporting team strategy with only sort of this defense and no offense, right? You're kind of going after people who've heard of you before, but you don't have any campaigns geared towards talking to the people who haven't heard of you before. And that's always the case in marketing. There's usually, unless you're like a mega brand, there's usually more people who haven't heard of you than who have heard of you. And so the solution to this problem is not to spend all that money on Facebook ads. It's actually to use Facebook for what it's really good at, which is this very custom audience targeting, okay, using remarketing. But we're going to have to increase those remarketing audiences by making the number of people who are familiar with your brand much bigger in 2021. I'm not talking like 10% bigger. I'm talking like 100 or 1,000 times bigger. And you're not going to get to that scale by spending, a couple dollars a click on Facebook ads. That's crazy. That's not cheap. That's ridiculously expensive for these top of funnel campaigns. So how do you get, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of people familiar with your brand without spending, a couple dollars a click? And the answer is, all sorts of things. I'll give you some examples, but it's like PR stunts. It's like, radio, television advertising, this kind of stuff that where it's just you're reaching millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people in a local audience, at scale. Like uh, if your budget looks like this on the left here, where you're spending most of the money on non-remarketing campaigns and a small amount on remarketing, I'm suggesting you switch to the other allocation on the other side of the screen, which it's spending all that non-remarketing money, most of it on radio or TV or PR. Just this might sound crazy, but it's just Facebook isn't a great way to develop top of funnel demand anymore because of the high costs. And so I wanted to just give you a couple of examples of how to drive mad hits for cheap. Here's an example of a post that I put on my LinkedIn page, and this is ridiculous. It's just like a 400 character status update, and it just talks about getting rejected hundreds of times for my business, and then getting 2 offers, and this stupid story got almost 1 million views, if 25.5 thousand website visitors, because something like 5% of the people who viewed the post actually navigated to my profile and then clicked the link on my profile to my website. So this is an example of generating 25,000 website clicks for free, like no media costs, and it took only about 15 minutes to write up this thing. And so that's what I'm talking about. You should be kind of deploying money in these more cheaper traffic generating places and then converting using remarketing, because that's how marketing works. Step one, these kooky PR stunts and social media updates that go viral organically. This has the effect of creating sort of some initial awareness, about your products and services to your target audience. Those people who consume that content won't necessarily buy your stuff right away, but they start to create a bias and a recall for your name or your company name, or some kind of notion of what you do. Later, when it comes the time to buy whatever the product or services you're selling, they're going to go search for it. But the hope is that they'll remember you from before. And what we know is that if they remember you from before, they're way more likely to click and way more likely to convert. And so that's what I'm talking about. Create the top of funnel demand off of Facebook and use Facebook exclusively as a kind of conversion, lower funnel activities. Guys, my last tip for today has to do with a new ad format called Facebook Messenger ads. Most of the ad spend on Facebook is done on traffic conversion and engagement ad formats. But if you haven't tried out this one at the bottom, the messaging format, I really love this one. Let me explain to you why I love it. It's kind of like a regular ad that when someone clicks on that button there, it sends them into a messenger funnel, which captures everyone's information the moment they click on it. That's kind of interesting, because when you send someone to your website, maybe 1 or 2% of the people will sign up for whatever it is that you're selling. But here you get the contact information for anyone who presses that button, as well as messaging permissions. And so what I do is, instead of sending people to these landing pages on my website, I send them into dialogues for Messenger, like surveys or registration forms, or I send them drip campaigns. This is all in Facebook Messenger. And it allows me to send users down different funnels by asking custom questions. And then depending on how they answer, I can kind of do different follow-ups. People love it. And it's so amazing because I can segment my kind of contact lists of Messenger users based on how they've responded to my intro questions. And that allows me to then remarket to them using sponsored messaging with super relevant messages, like this one that got an 85% response rate just for one message blast. I think that's incredible. How do you do this? Well, you can use software tools like MobileMonkey, which is my company. Like Facebook doesn't have any messenger tools in Business Manager. They rely on third-party partners like MobileMonkey to create these kind of visual dialogues, easily. Here's an example of a Facebook Messenger ad in real life. Here, this is an ad that I used to promote one of my online events a little while ago. And on the right side, what you can see is that this is a Facebook Messenger ad experience being users being sent to this kind of funnel where it's asking the user about, like, do you work at a company or an agency? The user responds with agency, and now we can customize the content to be relevant to that user speaking their language. Eventually, after answering a series of questions, sending them to a registration form, which is a web form. But I already have all their information and a lot of, like, information about their demographics and segmentations because of how they've kind of engaged with the funnel there. And the results are amazing. I can drive, registrations for events for a few dollars. Whereas if you don't use Messenger and you're just using like click ads, my experience is that it's closer to $300, $400, $500 per sign up, because it's like, you're paying $3 a click, and 1% of people sign up. It's just really brutal. Um, as soon as someone clicks on these messenger ads, you get their contact information, first, last name, etc., as well as messaging permissions, so that I can re-engage with those users with messages for a limited time period. And so, if you think about kind of Facebook Messenger ads against conventional vanilla ads, as I was saying before, maybe they click on your ad, maybe 2% of people end up signing up for the thing. So 98% of people, you have no idea who those people are. While, in Facebook Messenger, every time someone clicks, you get their contact information. You can kind of respond to them privately or in an automated way, for a certain period of time. You can re-engage with them for free. And there's all sorts of paid re-engagement ways, like sponsored messaging, that you should check out. Guys, the future of Facebook is less about the news feed. Facebook knows that the future is more about messaging. Messaging is sort of much higher engagement than by far, than email or regular Facebook ads. And people overwhelmingly prefer communication over messaging channels. And so, in summary, what does it all mean, guys? We've been talking about Facebook advertising hacks for the last 15, 20 minutes. Thank you for joining me on this epic journey from Donkey Land to Unicorn Land, where we're talking about Facebook ad hacks to try in 2021. We started at the top of the funnel by talking about the inverted unicorn and how targeting of unrelated interests can have a dramatic impact on your account performance. We also then went to the middle of the funnel, where we talked about, maybe it's time to cut some of the vanilla non-remarketing campaigns from your account and pursue a remarketing only strategy using Facebook. And we lastly talked a little bit about this, lower funnel conversion, and why I think that one of the most effective ad formats for that lower funnel conversion is actually these Facebook Messenger ads, which are super powerful. So that's all I have for you today. I just want to thank Growth Festival, the organizers, the attendees, everyone involved with this project for having, attended this show, having invited me. It's such an honor to be here. You can get the slides as well as additional bonus materials, for free. Just go to bit.ly/Growth Festival. Thank you so much, everyone. This is Larry Kim signing off. Have a great day. Bye, guys.